All right, good afternoon. I see we still got half a house here. It's that time of the day where we need to check whether you're still awake. I'd like to invite my panel up, please. We've got Scott Ansell, who's a partner and head of hospitality and leisure at Bowen Leighton Paisner. Did I say that correctly? Here we've got first is Chris Nader. Chris is the Vice President of Development for Kempinski within our region, and Tejas Shah, Development Director for Hyatt. Well, good afternoon, gentlemen. Welcome, and thanks for joining us and your participation. I would like to firstly just to begin with, we're going to handle the pre-development. So we're not going to go into design, development, construction, and pre-opening. That'll be handled later by Andrew. The heading, the cheat sheet for first-time hotel developers, certainly we have checklists. Do we have a cheat sheet, Tejas?
Good question. For a process this complex, yes, we do. And it's something that there is always a learning curve when it comes to first-time hotel owners. We have owners that come from varied industries, be it manufacturing, be it services, different groups. And there's always a learning curve when it comes to first-time hotel owners to have a cheat sheet in place, first of all.
Okay. We all understand the processes, but I often ask, is it a chicken and egg situation or a horse and cart situation? You need the land, okay? You've got a secure tenure to the land. You need a feasibility study. You need funding. You need an operator, which comes with a technical services agreement. Then you need a professional team, et cetera, et cetera. But what comes after the land? Do we do a concept first so that we can we can put a cost to it, get a QS's cost estimate? Then we go and match our concept to a particular brand. Scott, you obviously deal a lot on the legal side, and rather than touch on the hotel management agreement, let's rather look at the technical services agreement. The session is all about how do we develop correctly. What is the correct ABC?
Well, again, I'm a lawyer, but won't talk about the agreements. If you can do your operator search, do your beauty contests, narrow it down, and the earlier you can get an operator on board and get the technical services input, the better. I think probably the most valuable services you receive from an operator and a brand is not the management over 20 years, but getting the hotel configured the right way, learning from their experience in other places. You know, too many restaurants, no restaurant on the 4th floor, configuring the hotel rooms correctly, very valuable. So the earlier you can get that in place, obviously a feasibility study, and I think you want the feasibility study to match up with the brand too, to get it right.
Absolutely. So Chris, when should the client start talking to you as a hospitality company or to you as a particular brand within your portfolio? I've seen it before, and it's been mentioned by other panels that hotels are often ego developments, and make no doubt they are. And I've been through it in Abuja where the client said, no, I'm going to build a Four Seasons. Well, have you spoken to Four Seasons? No. I'm building a Four Seasons, and went through the concept and did a whole beauty parade with 4 international architects, paid them all a fortune to come up with a concept, paid all this money, and by the time he spoke to the feasibility consultant and said, well, go get me Four Seasons, they said no. So do we, as first-time developers, design what we want and then come and talk to you? Because we all know that you guys are only going to charge us money. You're not coming with your checkbook. You are only going to charge us from day one.
You know, I've often seen an owner who comes to us with a project already designed, and he has the Kempinski logo, on top of the 3D rendering. So we obviously advise them to start with the highest and best use study. You have the top 5 consultants sitting just behind this curtain, W Hospitality, Colliers, HVS, HTI, Horwath. Go listen to them. Apart from the financial projection that you need in a feasibility study, you need to understand where's the gap in the market, who are you building for? That's the key, really. Who are we going to build this hotel for? And from that, you understand what you need to build. The moment you have this HPU study in place, then you come to the operator with the advice of the consultants who will be able to tell you who is the best operator for this project that the study shows that is viable. And then we take the study, we do our own analysis, and then we provide you with the support and the services to make sure that whatever vision and concept was set in the study can be adapted to meet the requirement of the operator.
I think, ladies and gentlemen, that's a key takeaway, and we say it all the time. It comes down to employing the right professional team, the people with on-ground knowledge that can match up a project opportunity with a brand and an operator that is the most appropriate for that particular location. So, Tejas, we bring you guys in now, and we immediately hear about this technical services agreement. Without going into the cost of a technical services agreement, what does that say in English terms? What do you do for me?
Good question. The operator's role, and I think Chris mentioned it earlier as well, is to suggest a brand that supports the product. I was having this discussion earlier today. What the owners want to do is not build a product for the brand, but build a product for the market. Once the product is in place, when you have the brand on board, the value addition that a technical services does is not only just to sit there and give or share brand standards with the owners, but to give feedback in terms of drawings to create operational efficiencies, to create a sustainable product, to anticipate what is needed from different consultants that the owners have. So there is a lot of value add rather than somebody sitting in their corporate offices somewhere in the US and giving out standards. So, and that is what eventually costs money. There's a big perception, and there's certain markets out there where the perception is you get a brand on board too early, and these guys are going to make you spend too much money to build the hotel. That's not the case. What's going to cost you money is to create a sustainable asset, to create an efficient asset, and to create an asset which is competitive in the market space, not because the brand is in place.
Absolutely. Scott, talk to us from a legal perspective. What should we be looking at in these agreements with the operators? What stands out that you are looking to protect your client on, and advise your client on? Are there things? Is there anything scary in this technical services agreement?
Well, the reality of a technical services agreement is, if you read the text, it says, we will give you our standards, you will, maybe a few suggestions, you will comply with them, and we will tell you whether or not you met the standards. The brand doesn't take over and project manage or do the work. They review, they want to vet the consultants you get, and people preferably who've done hotels in the jurisdiction, understand the nuances, construction laws, and the like. But then they vet. But one thing, again, going back to getting your people on board early and highest and best use. I've seen where brands will modify their brand standards in tertiary cities where you're the first mover into a market. A good example, I did a lot of hotels, park-ins in Russia, in these regional cities. The park-ins, as far as the hotel, the rooms, is a standard park-in. But the ancillary services are well above a park-in standard because first game in town, it's the place people have their weddings. They have these Polliner breweries. It is the nightclub in town and everyone. It is the business meeting place. So you, again, recognize that the gym is open, is bigger than normal, and is open to the public to generate further revenue that you wouldn't get in your standard brand. And that wouldn't happen unless you got these people on board early and got the buy-in of the operator.
Okay, well,
If I may just add on to that, to the first point that Scott raised, I think the key word here is you're dealing with an operator. And there is a distinction between designing a product and creating functional efficiencies in the product. That's where we have our expertise, not in designing, but in creating learning from our experiences globally, from the different assets and the different classes that we work in, and to create something which works in the market. And that's where the distinction is. Yes, one can put it to say the operator just gives standards and review stuff, but the fine line is designing is one part of it and creating efficiency is the other part of it.
And I think it was touched on managing down expectations, branding down.
That's where our expertise is. That's where our core strengths are.
I just want to make sure that the first time hotel owners have to understand that in a technical agreement, the liability is not really on the operator, it's on the specialist that you hire. And we make sure in the technical agreement that we would only be liable for gross negligence. So when we're actually only giving advice, assistance, and support, the words that we use in these agreements are very important, and Scott can testify. But beyond the legal aspect of a technical agreement, it's important that you choose the operator who will be able to go beyond that just review and assist, sitting, as you say, in the US somewhere in an office and giving you comments by email on your drawings. Because this is your first hotel, you need to be able to choose an operator who can actually hold your hand, really, be here with you. And our technical guy should be able to draw the layout of a room if the designer you chose or the architect you chose is not really competent for some reason. We are here to go beyond that very basic service that is written legally in the agreement. So the trust in the operator, the relationship with the operator is important, and you will see a great difference between an Asian brand and an American brand and whatever is in between because of the culture, of the mentalities, of the legal requirement. So this is something that owners should watch out for.
Okay, so the technical services agreement technically then is an assistance. We heard the words, we don't take responsibility. So let's move on to those who do end up having to take responsibility, the professional team. I think more often than not, correct me if I'm wrong, by the time a sponsor is speaking to you, he's already got his architect on board, if not other professionals. And more often than not, in Africa, we tend to be bringing in expat professionals. How's that to be addressed? The man has got his local architect who he thinks is a particularly good architect.
Because he's done his house.
Because he did his house and he did his brother's cousin's flat, yeah. And of course, he stayed in many Hyatts around the world, so he knows what Hyatt is.
Of course he does.
Okay, so how do we deal with the professional team? Some of the brands, and you guys are at the upper level, so you would tend to insist on one or two additional consultants to what a standard mid-market brand would insist upon. Where do you say you need A, B, C, D consultants, and you need them at that particular time, and then we will give them technical specifications and assist them through the design process.
I think what's important for the owner to understand when he's hiring consultants is to have people who have the expertise that is needed for that job. If the owner is creating an international asset, international class asset in a market, he's better off getting inputs and engaging with consultants that are able to give him that. What we want to avoid as operators and as somebody who sits with the owner is to avoid a situation where your consultant is actually going through a learning curve at your cost. You may get a local consultant at a cheaper rate, but if he's not done an asset class like a hotel, he's essentially what he's doing is he's going through the learning curve in your project at your cost, which is not the most efficient use of the money.
We've seen many owners who come and say, look, my cousin, I worked with this guy, he did once a villa, I'm sure he can design your hotel. And in our agreement, we actually require approval on key specialists. Otherwise, we don't go into the project. So we need to approve the architect, we need to approve the interior designer. Sometimes we've asked, okay, which interior designer you recommend? And then we gave A, B, C, D options. They're all around same quality, same budget. And the owner comes and says, oh, how about this one? He's only $500,000. The others you suggested are $1 million. It may seem a big difference, but then the guy who's charging you $500,000, and here I'm talking luxury hotels, will actually delay to a certain extent the process. It will be a bit more difficult to teach him. It will be more difficult to train him to luxury and to our standards. So it's actually going to delay the process, and it's going to cost you more money than if you would have hired the guy that would charge you $1 million for its fees. So it may seem very easy to save money on those specialists as a first-time hotel owner, but please trust the operator. We've seen it in many places. At the end of the day, you will lose more.
I work for owners mainly, but you're right. You're not saving money in the long run by skimping on your professional consultants, designers, architects, lawyers, and the like early on. You're going to pay now, or you're going to pay a lot more later and have to do renovations. I always insult someone when I tell this bit of a joke. If you want an operator to run from the room immediately, say, don't worry, I've got the design under control. My wife's handling it. And almost every conference I've been, usually someone in the room, their face goes sour because it's a very common thing. Wife or mistress, give it the hotel to her. Everything becomes Versace.
But if I don't have my wife as the interior designer, it's a deal breaker, man. Come on. What do you expect?
Okay, so we've got the land, we've had the feasibility study, we've spoken to a brand, and our operator is there holding our hand. What is now the first step from an operator's perspective? What is the brief to the team? Do we allow them to get creative? Do we start setting the parameters? And how often are you there? Is it a handhold exercise? Is it an email exercise? Or are you physically at the design coordination meetings?
Once you have the study and you're on board and you have the specialist on board, I think it is the duty of the operator to, if they're not already in the market, and I guess in Africa it's going to be often the case, to send their team to validate on the ground what the study says, to try to take the area program that we all know how to do, because it's an Excel sheet, we just plug in the number and poof, you get an area program. But that's not the point. The point is to be able to customize that experience, that hotel, to the needs of the market. So there is an important step that we do, which is a kickoff workshop under the technical services agreement, where with the owner, with the consultants, the specialist, and the operator, we really try to breach the gap between the original vision of the owner, the results of the study, and what the operator believe we should do for that specific market. So this meeting is important. And yes, in the technical agreements, you have an article that says owner shall pay out-of-pocket expenses for sending your technical team to attend the meeting, so flights, meals, accommodation. Make sure you have an approval right on those out-of-pocket expenses. But it's going to cost you some money, but this type of meeting, when you're doing face-to-face, is much more efficient than emails.
As they say, it's not the plan that is important, it's the planning. And kickoff meeting in that sense is a forum or is a workshop where you're sitting together in one room, 2 days out, get the planning in place. Set the expectations in terms of the product, in terms of the positioning of it, and the expectations in terms of timelines as we move forward. Yeah.
Right, let's start getting a little specific with Africa and the challenges we face, particularly with long lead plant and equipment. And on the one hand, and Scott touched on it briefly earlier, you have market peculiarities. How far are you willing to allow your brand specifications or requirements or standards to be adapted to a particular market, if it's more food and beverage, if it's less food and beverage? We've got the challenges with power and water and sewage in particular that affect many things. It affects the service, it affects the cost, it affects the total built-up area. How are you adjusting your global brands to the African context?
Well, there is no choice but to be relevant to the market that you are in. And the products that you're building or planning to build have to cater to the market that you're building to. So as an example, food and beverage, typically in the mid-segment or upper mid-segment in the US, you would at best have a grab-and-go restaurant. However, if you get out of the US and you're working in Asia, Africa, Middle East, the expectation of the guest is to have warm meals served on a daily basis. So you do need to have one restaurant. Now, yes, you need to have one restaurant, but you have to be relevant again to the space that you're playing in. You are in the upper mid segment, and you cannot afford to have specialty restaurants, as an example. So do we serve fresh food? Yes, we do. But we're not going to fly in an Italian chef to run an Italian restaurant in a 4-star hotel. So yes, you have to be relevant, but you have to cater to the segment that you are targeting as well.
Chris, coming back to our challenges in Africa, how would you as an operator be able to add value to an African client, particularly in terms of we do have to build a little bit bigger, we do have more costs in this part of the world. What has your experience in Africa been to date where you can say, no, Mr. Rona, we saved you because we did X?
We have 11 hotels in Africa, and you know, the other operators have also several hotels in Africa. And I think it's important as a first-time hotel owner to go with someone who has already experience in Africa, because with the exception of 2 or 3 hotels in Africa, all the openings were delayed, all the constructions were delayed. Sometimes it's because the owner thought that with, you know, his entourage, he can do project management, and it becomes such a mess. So, number one, please hire a project manager. It's very important. It's going to simplify your life. It's going to simplify our life. Second, where we add value is that we made mistakes in some areas.
A lot of owners think you are the project manager. Not the case. No. Time is money. A project manager is expensive. He saves you a month. He's paid his bills.
Yeah, no, we don't do project management. Our technical team does its own project management for internal purpose, but we don't manage the other consultants and suppliers. But having opened several hotels, having done also sometimes mistakes, having done good things, we are able actually to quite often readjust and put everyone back on track to be able to achieve that vision. In some instances, we came on a project where about 20% of the project cost was on the material used for the facade. And we said, it's just crazy. So although, yes, okay, Kempinski is a luxury hotel, you don't need to spend 20% of your cost on a facade. So we're able actually to be able to readjust the cost and spread it in other areas to have something a bit more efficient. So there are various ways where, with experience, we manage to help shorten that construction stage.
Right. Going on with the agreements, and what is a deal breaker? You've both said, yes, you're willing to adapt your brands for a local market, but what are the deal breakers? What are the absolute no-go areas? What is the owner not allowed to twist your arm on?
Well, I think more than the agreements, I would say when it comes to designing the hotel or setting the standards of what you're building, the two deal breakers, if I can use that term, I hate to use that term though, but if I may, is fire and life safety and guest experience. That is something that we not like to compromise on. There are reasons behind why a hotel needs to be compliant when it comes to fire and life safety standards, especially in terms of getting businesses. If you are dealing with corporates to get business in the hotel, many multinational companies will not even let you participate in an RFP if your hotel is not compliant with the international fire and life safety codes. Secondly, guest experience. I think for us, our products are about unique guest experiences, and that's something that we don't want to compromise. Every brand that we have in our portfolio is defined by a certain experience. We've gone away from this approach of defining a brand by a grid, but it's about an experience. So these are the two things that we are probably like to say we are very disciplined about, rather than say it's a deal breaker.
I would add to that minimum room size, because if you're going for this brand, it's because you're expecting that guest experience that they're just talking about. So it needs certain minimum sizes to be able to achieve that. Second is the liability clauses. I know lawyers, Sarah, Scott, you try a lot to negotiate that, but for us, this type of clause really is sacred. And third for us is the governing law under which the agreements are actually signed. You can't expect an operator to sign its agreement under the law of each African countries wherever we're developing. So we insist to have an international arbitration outside of the country, and the governing law to be either England and Wales or Switzerland or the international ones.
I think you will flex a little bit on room size if you've got an opportunity. If 28 is the standard, you'll go to 25. But the choice of law thing, a lot of owners think, well, it's national pride. We want to use our local law. We have an advantage. Fact is that in particularly civil law countries, the courts and things and the law is really doesn't have the history, the knowledge and the expertise to properly interpret these hotel agreements. So in many ways, you're better off opting for something, a common law like England, and then you have arbitration, be it in Switzerland, Stockholm, London, and then enforce it locally. So you're not, it might be a nice national ego thing, but you're not necessarily helping yourself. Liability, what do you mean? You run my hotel, you run my bank account, you make all the decisions, you set all the rates, and if something goes wrong, it's my fault. Don't entirely agree with that. But it's a minimal risk service provider. That's what a hotel operator is.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a few more minutes. Are there any questions from the floor? Are there any budding developers who would like to challenge one of our development directors up on the stage? Yes, ma'am. Could we get a microphone, please?
Thank you. My name is Shade. I'm from Nigeria. The comment that Mr. Antle just made, I'd like some responses from the operators on that, the last comment that you made. In terms of aligning interests, operator versus owner, in terms of the management agreements, like you said, we sponsor the project, we spend the money according to your budget, you operate the accounts, you get priority returns. Something goes wrong, it's us that holds the can. Where's the win-win? How do we get a win-win? Is there a win-win?
Well, you're partially getting some alignment if you structure the fee structure in a way that the operator, you push more of it into an incentive fee and less into a base fee. The liability, I mean, this is the standard day option. You can you certainly get gross negligence, but gross negligence in many jurisdictions isn't even recognized, and it's a pretty high level standard. And what the operators will really try to do, they send you a GM, they send you a financial director, you may get the right to approve them, they put them on your payroll. The people who are likely to commit negligence is not the head office, it's going to be the GM or the finance director. And then you go to say, they're grossly negligent, and they go, no, they're your employee. Even though they're the quarterback, they're the alter ego of the operator. So I always said, at least with respect to the GM and finance director, for purposes of liability, they will be treated as operators' employees. I get it sometimes, I don't. But the whole model, it's a limited risk service provider. They do their things, but they're not accepting liability. Their argument would be, if we accepted the liability, the fees would be higher.
We shouldn't have Scott negotiating against us.
Note to self. Shadi, we can get to that when we come to the management agreement, surely.
Are there any other questions from the floor? No? Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel.